At the beginning of this year, Oris released the new changes on the Aquis, which is their most popular model. And to be completely honest with you, when I saw the photos, I felt a little disappointed. Because to me, it seemed like the watch was basically the same watch with minor changes. At least in the photos, it seemed like that. So when I knew that there was going to be a revamp of the Oris Aquis, I asked the director of Latin America if I could review the watch. But then I thought, maybe not. Because I'm probably not going to like it, and I'm just going to talk bad things about it. However, at the Oris event where these watches were physically presented, my mind completely changed. The moment I saw the new Aquis, I knew I had to review it so that all of you could see the physical changes, because I repeat, they were not very clear on the website or in the press photos. But also, the moment I saw this watch, I knew I had to add it to my collection because it is a completely new and different Aquis. Now in my hands, I have an older version of the Oris Aquis, which will help us understand perfectly the changes that have occurred through this model. It is worth mentioning that at the Oris event, I had the fortune of meeting Luis Hernandez, the Matador, who is the new Oris ambassador in Mexico. And I also had the privilege to have a long conversation with Rolf, who is the CEO of Oris, which I think I can call my friend now. And he undoubtedly opened my eyes to the brand's new direction and positioning. Now, one thing that is very, very clear to me is that Oris is looking to enter the luxury watch market, or they have entered it. Now, if you have seen some of my past videos, you know that I have great appreciation for Oris because they just do things completely differently. But in my opinion, and this is solely my opinion, the price increase that the Oris Aquis had in the recent years was a bit steep for what it offered. However, this time, not only was there a price adjustment, but also these updates that the watch brings to the table demonstrate completely that Oris is ready to compete with the big players in the luxury watch market. Now let's start by analyzing the market and the strategy of Oris. Firstly, the Aquis represents about 50% of all Oris sales. Imagine this model represents half of what you sell every year, which obviously makes it one of their most classic and above all most popular models. Now the Oris Aquis before was a robust watch, known as a tank ready for action. It was a heavy watch because you can actually feel the weight difference. It had a thick bracelet or a thick band. It was overall a watch that felt like a tool. And I think that's what they needed at the beginning. Oris needed a watch that many people could wear. One that could withstand basically the apocalypse and obviously look very good doing it. However, I believe that the price changes and the evolution of Oris did not go hand in hand with this specific tool watch. And I mean that when a brand is looking to be considered part of the high luxury watch market, they need to basically refine certain things with some products. And here is where we will compare the new Aquis with this previous version. Now, if you can see, we have a tall, robust watch, which literally looks like a well-built, flat tank. Even the lugs feel chunky and robust to a certain extent. It really feels like a chunky watch, but it most certainly feels like a watch that you could bring to the apocalypse, and it would last centuries because it is a tank, which is perfect. That was what was needed at that time. But what happens when a general ends war. There is no more war for that general. They need to evolve or die. They need to redefine themselves. They need to refine their person. They need to become more political, more worldly. And that's what happened to the new Oris Aquis. Firstly, we see a much more rounded and ergonomic profile. Basically, we have a watch that feels much better on the wrist. Look at how it sits on the wrist. Perfect. I mean, of course, it is much more comfortable. At the bottom of both sides, we have a beveling that makes the watch look much more aerodynamic. Of course, this makes the watch feel lighter, but also look much more slimmer. And here you can compare. I hope that you can see the differences. Trust me, the detail of the beveling alone makes it feel like a much more refined manufacturing process. And of course helps us understand the direction Oris is taking in becoming a luxury brand. The edge of the bezel is much more pronounced. It has greater grip. Even the angle of the insert and crystal looks much more aggressive, making the design look more defined, if that makes sense. Now let's hear the bezel. Good sounding bezel. Now let's hear the older one. They both sound really good. The crown guards are much more refined. This watch no longer looks like a tank made for war. It's a refined sports tank, if that makes sense. The lugs, which were robust and chunky, have now become much more aerodynamic. They're no longer as thick, and these changes certainly help the watch feel lighter, but they also help it look much more slimmer. One of the things that made the Aquis feel so robust, like a tank, was the bracelet, or in this case, the strap. It had a really robust and chunky bracelet with a very small taper, very small taper. It was sturdy, but very heavy. So now we have this taper that comes from the lugs, and you can compare. You can see the lugs, they're basically straight. They have a really small taper. Now we have a bigger and aggressive taper. And that helps the watch become sharper, which of course makes the reduction in the strap or in the bracelet much more aggressive, as we can see. Now, of course, this strap has the biggest taper, which makes the clasp much smaller and much more comfortable. And of course, we have this spectacular color, like olive green strap, which is just ridiculous. Now let's talk about the clasp. It was important here because this clasp was a monster. It felt secure, but now the new clasp sacrifices the quick adjustment, which personally, I actually like this clasp much better. Of course, it goes hand in hand with the new image the Aquis wants to portray. Personally, I like the smaller clasp much more because it obviously goes hand in hand with this new, more refined Aquis image. Now, the reality is I rarely use the quick adjustment of the clasp, and I really think this clasp works very well. Again, this is all part of what Oris is aiming for in the high-end luxury watch market. Now, I believe that in terms of construction, general construction of the watch, Oris hit a home run, showing this new evolution and of course the direction they are taking. Why? Well, it's simple. Oris has shown that they can take something classic like their Aquis and refine it to a certain extent to become a high horology timepiece. But the most important thing is that they did this without losing the essence of the Aquis. It still feels like a quality, robust watch, but it has a completely new look. It is a watch that remains being the flagship of the brand, but curiously, with these small changes, it feels much more expensive. Now that is all outside the general build quality of the watch, which is spectacular. Now when we dive a bit to the dial, we can see some other subtle changes that I actually believe make a big difference. Now apparently Oris developed a completely new and exclusive font just for the Aquis. If you look the comparison, you can see that the letter edges are a bit less decorated, making it more of an understated and elegant timepiece. And I think in general, all of this makes the watch feel like a luxury item. I believe that aesthetically this watch has evolved into a much higher level timepiece. Of course, not everything is perfect in my eyes. And this is completely my opinion. I love Oris, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say this. Of course, I am not the CEO of Oris for a reason. I am not the director of Latin America. With George, what would I have changed to give it that little leap that I feel it's missing? Now this watch that you see today here is the basic Aquis that comes with the caliber 733 of Oris, which is a Sellita SW200 movement. But without a doubt, it's a high quality movement. It is a workhorse, it is simple to repair, and it is extremely reliable. But it is the caliber that the Aquis has had for what, 7, 10, 15 years or more. I understand that Oris released the same collection with the caliber 400, which is their in-house movement, their in-house caliber. It has a 5-day power reserve, and of course it's a different level to this watch. But personally, I would have done a bit of an upgrade to the caliber 733. Now we all know, as I said before, that this movement is based on the Sellita SW200, which has a power reserve of 38 hours and it is not particularly decorated. Now what would I have done? I would have used the SW300 instead, which overall is a much more decorated movement. It has up to 56 hours of power reserve, not the 5 days, but 56 hours, it's a big improvement, or at least in the new versions it does. And aesthetically it looks quite different. The architecture of the movement is different. And I would like it to look different because the Sellita SW200 and the ETA movement have become somewhat of a generic movement inside the industry because most brands use them. They are accessible, they are reliable, and they are great. But I think that to take that extra step in distinguishing Oris from the other brands and identifying more closely with luxury watchmaking, the Sellita SW300 would have done a way better job. Now I repeat, of course, that is my opinion. I am not the CEO, I'm not the director, but that's what I think. The more I wear this watch, the more I like it. And this was, completely honest, this watch was loaned to me for review by Oris. But I will not be returning this watch to the office because I will buy it. It will not be a gift. I will buy it with my own money because I like it that much. But let me know, what do you think? Do you like these changes? And do you think Oris is heading in the right direction to establish themselves as a luxury watch brand? I'd love to hear what you think.